Thank you, Vineet, for bringing us these very interesting episodes. So, how did you get into this journey? You're an MBA, and how did you switch, or are the two connected in any way?
No, so I think this is my, to be fair and honest, it's a passion project. I always had quite a few ideas in terms of what I wanted to do. But having said that, I was still trying to flesh myself. And I started a Twitter handle during the COVID period. And post the Twitter handle, I also joined Clubhouse. And that's where I started articulating a lot of my points of view on culture and civilizational issues.
Mm.
And that's when I noticed that there was a lot of traction. A lot of people were interested in the ideas that I shared. And thereafter, slowly and steadily, the following grew. I went into Instagram as well. And then I connected with Indic Academy, especially Professor Edward Butler, and
Okay.
got to speak in the Global Polytheist Conference. And from there on, I think my journey started. I had a lot of support from friends and well-wishers in the ecosystem. And yeah, from there, once it took off, the first step was the hardest one, to be honest. And once that took off, there was no stopping thereafter.
Right. See, a lot of us, including me, have come from mainstream journalism to the Indic fold for journalism. I mean, we separated our personal lives and our professional lives because that was necessitated, in our professions. So, is it, are you better off where you don't have to have that separation between your personal values and belief systems and what you do professionally?
Something that I wanted to pursue, and it defines me at a personal level. So I always felt that when we were talking about the civilizational perspective, and my podcast is purely on the socio-cultural realm, I don't focus outside of that. I really don't. The topics are not about public life or anything like that. It is essentially society and culture.
Mm.
And the idea was that I felt that a lot of youngsters were getting deracinated. Luckily for me, since I had an upbringing very close, especially with my grandparents, thanks to
Mm.
them, I was still rooted in, where I was. And while I was engaging in contemporary life, I was also culturally inclined. But I felt that a lot of my compatriots, millennials as well as Gen Zs, were getting deracinated. And I felt that to an extent, the problem was that the civilizational perspective was only coming from a traditionalist view. While a traditionalist view is great and it is important, I also felt that somewhere it is important to engage with youngsters in the language, the cultural grammar that they understand. And with young people, usually youngsters are very rebellious, and there is a certain societal trajectory that youngsters usually take in India and globally, where they always want to kind of rebel against the establishment. And when you come very hard and heavy on them with that, the response is always going to be to oppose it. So the idea was to present the civilizational perspective, but in a more friendly, casual, relaxed environment, without taking away the essence, but also keeping it relevant in a way that is very quote unquote modern, because modernity as a word has been unfortunately corrupted quite a bit. So the idea has always been that modernity is antithetical to tradition. And my argument has always been that uh, modernity is a generic concept. And we usually, at least in India, we equate modernity with westernization and Western values. I wanted to challenge that narrative. Modernity is a broad concept, and Western modernity is what we think is modernity, which is that there has to be a rupture, a breaking point from the past, right? In my view, Indic modernity is a concept that I wanted to bring to the fore, which is change with continuity. That we move forward, we remain in the contemporary world, and still we remain, rooted and relevant in the ancient values. Think of it in a way that you think of the Shruti and the Smriti. The Shruti never changes with time because it's the basic foundation block, but the Smriti does. And that is, in a way, modernity, because up you are kind of reinterpreting or reimagining your culture based on the here and now. So there is a trajectory, there is a historical experience that you have traversed. At the same time, you're still living in the present. So, in my view, it's important to know about your past, but it is also important to remain in the present, in the moment, and obsess about your future. Because if you were to only think about the past as a golden age, because every civilization has a golden age, and we say for India, Sone ki chidiya. But in my view, that Sone ki chidiya has to be an inspiration for you to create that thing again, today, in the here and now, or in the future. That I think was the crux of my thinking. And when I went into Clubhouse and I did a lot of rooms, and then from there I slowly scaled and went into the podcasting space on YouTube, that is when I saw that a lot of people are interested in that kind of, narrative. So they are not antithetical to civilizational causes, but at the same time, they want it in a way that is, you know, very relevant today. And I'll give you an example. I once interviewed a guest who basically this is someone who does Mahabharata readings and recitals in cafes and eateries in Mumbai. Very cool places that you would say that youngsters hang out in, but not a place where that you would imagine a Mahabharata would be read or discussed. But I found that concept quite interesting. So you hold a cup of coffee, someone is doing a recital, and the interesting thing here is that the first Ramayana and Mahabharata that you hear, that you know of, is the one that you heard at home. It's not the one that you read. It's not even the one that you saw on TV. It's the one that you heard at home. And many of these discussions would veer into someone from, let's say, Assam or Gujarat, and what they, the stories that they heard that their grandmothers told them. And I think of it as a funnel. You get into it in the first place. And then when you want to go, when your interest is piqued and you want to go deeper, that's when you engage in greater study, in greater rigor. If the funnel starts with, you don't become a PhD on day one. You have to cross the miles. If you come that, you have to come with the rigor of a hardcore researcher who, engages with the critical edition, that's not going to help in terms of engaging more people in. And those who are anyways interested will go further, more like deeper. So, I mean, that's the journey that pretty much most of us had. So that is a very metaphorical explanation of how I see this play itself out. So in my view, Indic modernity is not antithetical to tradition. It is something that coexists with it. And these are people who, who are just as passionate. If they get into it, they are just as passionate as anyone else. So yeah, this was a space where I think there was a gap. So yeah, like, so in probably if you look at the civilizational space, you would have three sections of people, and Abhinav Prakash has written an article very well on this, which is that you have the traditionalists, then you have the traditionalists who look at the past and, see the glories in it, and they want to kind of keep that, preserve that at all costs. The conservatives who are somewhere in between, who have one leg in the past, but at the same time who think about how we can link it today. And the modernists who are also in the present, think about the past, but they are also forward looking, all at the same time. And in my view, we shouldn't think of each of these as exclusive sets. People can migrate as well. And all of these groups, at the end of the day, they care about the dharmic ethos. That's what unites them. So I think the glue is more important than the differences. So that's how I kind of see it. So in my podcast, my idea was to get guests who represent different facets of Indian culture, whether it's a martial artist, of Kalaripayat, or if it is a singer like Malvika Sundar, who is a trained exponent of Carnatic music and who has lived in a Gurukul since a very young age, you know. But at the same time, she sings pop music as well. Then there is a dancer that I got on my show, Shweta Warrior, who's been on India's Best Dancer, the reality, the talent show that happens on television. She does Bharatnatyam fusion, with Western styles. So there are a lot of people who we may so anybody who engages with different facets of culture, from singing, dance, poetry, artistry, one of my big passions is how AI can be harnessed to create artwork, and there are some brilliant AI artists who have used very uh, good like, the artificial intelligence can be your ally, and they've used that to create great artwork around Shiva, different temple architecture, very unique style of temples. And these things really uh, fascinate me. And these aspects of it, it's a small subculture within Indic modernity. I mean, I know this when I'm talking about my journey, it's almost like a primer of this, because this is an area of the civilizational movement which has not been covered at all, or is not really as well known, or usually it gets kind of dismissed. But yeah, so there is a subculture of people called Indic futurists who use dharmic themes and create artworks which are science fiction. Like, how would the future look in a very evolved sci-fi world universe. And these kind of very creative aspects are also present. So uh, I think all of these things need an outlet, and it is my just a very small attempt to bring stories of this nature uh, to the fore. So that's what I intend to do with my podcast.
Mhm. I used to run a music magazine, and we used to have a column called Music and Me, where we interviewed people not from the music world, but from outside, but have music interests. For instance, we interviewed Rakesh Sharma and what music he listened to when he was in space. So what we found was that, these values, I mean, apart from the traditionalists, conservatives, the futurists, there's a value system that seems like in a continuum, which we share with our ancestors and the past. So apart from preserving, our architecture, our music, our book, our scriptures, there's a value system which seems to be very common in all of your uh, guests. So what would you say? It's like whether he's a general or whether, it's a musician, there seems to be an Indic value system, which is, you cannot ignore it. It's something very pronounced. So if you were to describe that quality, what would you say that?
That's a very good observation. I always the central narrative, there is a meta narrative with that, which is that no matter in which walk of life you belong, whether you're a corporate leader, For example, I had brand manager, like brand strategists like Piyush Pandey and Sohail Seth, or I've had military generals, whether it's Iron Man General Dogra, or Colonel Abhishek Chaturvedi, and even GD Bakshi. The kind of they come from different walks of life, but they are culturally rooted. And the point I'm trying to make here, through very diverse stories, uh, and when I present those diverse stories, there's a very important thread, which is that I don't want the fact that, oh, they are culturally rooted to be the main story. It's very kind of, it just flows in, it's just part of who they are. And the idea here is that no matter which environment you are, where you've grown up, what you've become,
Yeah.
dharma has shaped you in some way.
Mm.
And that shows the versatility in which dharmic values are relevant even today. That's the crux that I'm trying to drive. If I was to call someone who is only a spiritual guru, and every show of mine was just on philosophy and spirituality, then firstly, it would become repetitive. Secondly, it would show only one aspect. And I have always felt that, like even in the Mahabharata, Arjuna's, like his duty was to go fight the war. It wasn't about him giving up the Shastra and going to the Himalayas and becoming a yogi. That wasn't what it was. So the idea is that no matter where you are, whatever is your guna and the work that you are pursuing, how dharma becomes relevant in your life. So when I had a chat with General GD Bakshi, I had a very, that's a podcast, that's the latest podcast I did. I've done around 63, 64 episodes, I think, and counting. And it was about his spiritual experiences. And the first question I asked him was, he's a military hero. Spirituality, military, where did that happen? And he was telling me that he didn't become spiritual after retirement. It's not like, Vanaprastha ashrama and then, no, he was spiritual even before he was in the military. And the most interesting answer I got from him was he joined the military because he was spiritual. And I don't want to give a spoiler, so go watch the show. So for him, my assumption was he joined the military. That was his main thing. But he had actually wanted to be someone who goes to the Himalayas and, pursue his sadhana. And the best way that he could find to go to the Himalayas was to join the military. This is like so interesting and unique. And this kind of story never comes out, right? And it was a very gentle conversation, exploring a very softer side of him. It was quite amazing to see that. And so a lot of that. I have also done shows on history, so philosophy, culture. So you name it, when it comes to Indic culture in terms of socio-cultural issues, I have tried to, cover every gamut possible till now and have a lot more to cover as well. So that's been a great experience for me. To be honest, these are people that I would never have gotten the time of the day with in my regular life. So my podcast has literally been like a visiting card for me to get an opportunity to speak with them and pick their brains. And part of the fun has been the podcast, but a lot of fun has also been the conversation and interaction that led to the podcast, because that I think has been very personally enriching for me. The things that you do to set things up. And initially, when you are a new content creator, people are a little skeptical. Thankfully, I had a lot of help and allies, both Indica as well as otherwise. The Bharat Varta podcast, Roshan Kariappa, huge shout out for him and his team for helping me. I had no idea how a mic works and all of that. I kind of learned all of that in the job. And yeah, I had a lot of people who helped me out, especially in the beginning. But 5, 6 episodes down the line, somewhere I hit a, hit that comfort zone. And I think from there was no looking back. Initially, uh, I was doing, except for the editing, pretty much everything was being done by me. But slowly I scaled it up, and seeing the growth, I was then able to, uh, you know, build a team. I remember going to the Pondi Lit Fest, and Shiv Kumar ji, I shared a video. I used to share a video with him almost every week whenever my podcast would go up. And he messaged me saying, I'm at Pondi Lit Fest. I'm like, I'm also at the Pondi Lit Fest. So he was like, you just shared the video. How are you at the Lit Fest? I'm like, I have a team. So that was the sign of, my setup maturing, because I don't have to be there.
Mm.
I shoot the podcast and probably spend 15 minutes to 30 minutes a week to talk to my team about what challenges they are facing, etc., etc. And that's it. I have outsourced everything, I've delegated everything else, and that keeps it up like a well-oiled machine. So this is something that I'm really, proud of, because I've gotten a chance to also mentor some young people. Uh, I have a great editor. I've worked with a lot of editors, but I have one great editor with whom I'm working right now. He's definitely culturally rooted, and very much. And I also have a team, who handles the content marketing, the digital marketing of my channel, the posting, all of that. And it's a bunch of four or five girls, and uh, who don't want to take money from their father. They were starting a small business, and I thought that I really liked their story, and I got a chance to mentor them. And to be honest, I learned quite a lot from them as well. So it's been quite a fulfilling experience in that sense, to talk to people and the things that I had to do to set things up. And in that sense, I've come out much, like a lot richer than I would have even initially thought, that when I was starting out. I didn't quite honestly expect that I would cross 3 to 4 videos, but I've crossed 60.
Fantastic.
So I've also gotten a chance to write for Brown Pundits as well. So uh, along the way, I've had so many great mentors, whether it's Sri Iyer ji and Vibhuti Jha ji, Harsh Madhusudan Gupta, a really great friend of mine. So uh, yeah, it's been very fulfilling, and I'm looking forward to taking up newer challenges as well.
Fantastic. In the routine journalistic work, we usually have a big entry point because of the organization we work with. So if you're in Express or you're in ET or you're in Mint, that brand itself is enough to make the story reach its target audience. Then you have the subject who is a celebrity, on whose status or popularity the story finds its success. Then there is the individual charisma of the journalists themselves, who become star and recognizable faces in media because of their views and their personality and all that. So in the Indic space, I feel all of these three are very difficult to come by. Because one is, you don't have big media backing, which is pro dharmic. Then to find individuals who are very popular is also a little bit of a sticky wicket, because their views could be very it could not may not go well with all audiences. So then you have the journalists themselves, because it takes a lot of time for you to become this celebrity journalist unless you are in mainstream media. So, in your own videos, I saw like some videos, one crossed 9,000 views and the others are, varied audiences. So why, how do you, deal with this, and how do you, your marketing or your strategy team, how can we make sure that all our videos are up there at 9,000, 10,000?
Quite honestly, that's a challenge and a code that I'm still trying to crack. Uh, there are a lot of things. YouTube is a algorithm game, and to be very honest, when I start, I mean, it's kind of, I had a very unique journey. I don't know if everybody would have had that. Uh, Pretty much early on, after a few episodes, I was able to get great guests. I had actually no trouble in getting great guests. I had absolutely probably 3, 4 episodes, and that too, I think I thought that first I'll fix my podcast, make it a little slick. But pretty much from the fifth or sixth episode, I had uh, Guru Prakash Paswan ji, the national spokesperson of the BJP. I think it was my sixth episode. So pretty much from there on, it's for me, guests have somehow not been a problem. I don't know what I have done great, good in that or not, but I was able to uh, talk to people and get them to give me a chance initially. And I think once you start building a portfolio, of what you've done, like a CV in a way, looking at what you've done before, people start taking you seriously anyways. So to me, that wasn't a challenge. See, when you are starting out, it's always important to, firstly, you need to have that conversation with that person and create a connect. And no matter how much of an upstart you are, the other person needs to see the value in you. If not in your audience, then in you, you know. So somehow I was able to convince people to come, and I think in many cases, especially, I mean, this is not me saying, but especially General Dogra, which meant a lot. He said that he's gone to a lot of podcasts, but the kind of questions that I asked him, nobody has asked him before. So doing a lot of research on the topic and on the guest, and many a times uh, going into areas which they have not gone before, definitely helps, because I have had a lot of repeat guests also, and they've remembered, they've liked the experience. It's so that is something that I had to strive to do, because if I was, let's say, a well-known face, you can kind of coast through sometimes. But in my case, I had to ensure that, everything was in place, the settings, the tuning, when you're coming on time, all of that. From my side, there cannot be a gap, especially when I'm starting out. But yeah, as time goes by, as once somebody knows you've done 50, 60 episodes, the kind of guests I've had, whether it's Abhijit Iyer Mitra, Kushal Mehra, Guru Prakash, I mean, like I've had some really amazing guests, and my topics have also been somewhat different, not covered usually either in the news or for that matter, even in popular YouTube channels. So that has helped. Those who have seen the channel have, of course, given me good feedback. Sometimes, there are some things to improve. I take that into consideration. I'm very responsive on the comment section, my team as well. So that has been there, and that has helped me kind of uh, evolve my show as well. So yeah, that is, I think that is something that I would call work in progress. So that's really it's not something that I would say I have reached, but it's a game of numbers, to be honest. And I felt that at some point, if you've done probably 100, 200 episodes, and as you keep doing it, it's that one video that will strike out, and then you get discovered. So it's that initially I used to get very hassled about numbers, because I would expect that a certain show was really, really good. Like I really felt, there are those days when you feel that you've hit the nail with the hammer. That was one thing that I saw, like I felt after my conversation with Malvika Sundar, and she's also a well-known celebrity. That video didn't take off. And then there are other times when I felt that the guest is not that well known, or the topic is not something that people will search for. And somehow that topic and that video took off, So it's very difficult to
Random, yeah.
predict. You have to play keywords, etc., a lot of things. But consistency in terms of the timing, in terms of when you post every week, not missing it, that is very important. And it has to be a mix of well-known people and upcoming people whom nobody knows about. So there's a little bit of balance in terms of views and people kind of looking at it. I did, to be very honest, sometimes I would feel a little demotivated if certain videos didn't perform well. But then when I look at it at a larger level, I realized that firstly, for my own sanity, I can't keep looking at the views and subscribers all the time. But also, the amount of gains I have made is so much more than just the views, you know, uh, that that itself is worth the experience. And in a way, I would say ki, I don't know, there is that proverb from the Gita only, if I say that in Hindi, which is karm karo or phal ki aasha mat karo. So at some point, I just decided to go there and yeah, so I just do my work, whatever best I can, and I just leave the right time and place for it to find visibility. That's how, and of course, my team does all the things that is required, whether it's keyword, tags, SEO, all of that, good thumbnails. I mean, we do all of that. But yeah, beyond the point, I have stopped looking just at the numbers, and I just hope that the process will take over at some time, and yeah, it'll
And
become consistent.
what is the value of, this positive journalism? Now we are flooded with, whether it's in the dharmic space or in, general public, most of the media and journalism is all about negativity and hard sell and, shouting loudly in, recording rooms. So now we have an alternative in Indic Explorer where there is, a more sensible and, positive civilizational value journalism. So how do we compete with that kind of brash, loud, noisy journalism?
The honest answer to that is you can't compete with it because entertainment has gotten into news as well. So, firstly, it's that. Secondly, I would not say that I'm in the space of news and journalism, actually. I would say by saying Indic Explorer, I myself am exploring. So, there is a little bit of me being a student in a way and learning as well. And at the same time, I think of it not necessarily just as positive, but the fact that you can get uh, more insight when you have an open conversation and you nudge the person. So it's not that it's all lovey-dovey in terms of my podcast as well, in the sense that the conversations are there, they are effortless. There is no got you moment that I do with my guests. But at the same time, I don't hesitate to call people from different points of view. It is not an echo chamber. I don't hesitate to call, if I feel that the guest has said something that I don't agree with, I do challenge them as well. But the way it is done has to be very polished in the sense that if you nudge the person and tell that, okay, I get what you're saying, but what about this line of thinking? You will be surprised sometimes you get guests to change their opinion in the middle of the show itself. So, I mean, I've experienced that, which you will never get to do if you were to shout them out of the way. They're going to defend their position to death. So, that is also something that, you know, uh, so I feel somehow that making noise is seen as showing toughness. I think you can be polite and still be very tough, polite but firm. You can still do that. So that's a balance that can be struck. But considering the fact that I'm talking about socio-cultural issues, usually the conversations can be open-ended. But the challenge with this is that since the topics I choose are somewhat evergreen, this is a challenge, but also an advantage. Uh, I don't follow trending topics. Some news item today happening, cover that. No, that's not what I do at all, to be honest. I am looking at macro themes. So when I'm looking at it from such a large macro perspective, my video will age well because I'm not talking here on December 2023. The topics that I am talking about will be valid tomorrow, next year, next month, you know. So my idea here is not to get to the trend, which is why virality is difficult for me. But over a long period of time, if I build a good enough catalog, people will come back to see. And I've seen that a lot of my videos from a year back are still being seen today. Sometimes even more than some of my recent videos, because they are not topical to that time. They are larger themes. So I wouldn't look at what is happening today or on a Friday or on a Thursday. So, it's very broad and macro. So people who are into larger kind of thinking, they would really appreciate this rather than those who are looking at daily, because there is a lot of reactionism, a lot of high decibels. I want to kind of go away from that and then look at the issue on hand. So because of that, I think I have been able to succeed in covering issues in a more holistic way, in a way that people can understand. And guests also appreciate it. Guru Prakash told me that it was, on the show, that it was great to not, lose the energy shouting out. And it was good to have a very different conversation. Usually it's like, so yeah, I mean, I'm kind of proud of that. So that is something that I would say is my USP.
Fantastic, Vineet. Thank you so much for this engaging conversation, and wishing your show all the very best at the end of the year and in 2024. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
bringing us this fresh air uh, looking at things from a youth perspective, but yet looking at something that is totally ancient and undated. Yeah. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you so much.